Season 8 has been described by the producers as the culmination of the first part of the story, before Season 9 starts a new era of the show. This provided the opportunity to bring a few of the long-spanning themes to their conclusion, and there are some very satisfying payoffs to be found. The season continues with the more electronic ambient music, but the more melodic music often leans back towards an acoustic sound. The most musically and emotionally significant event of the season is of course Carl's death, and most of what we're going to cover surrounds that. As Carl first reveals his bite to Rick, we get a long-awaited return of his theme, bringing back nostalgia for the first few seasons and reminding us of how far the character has come. There's also a nice Easter egg as Carl talks about the events at the end of Season 3. The guitar softly plays the melody, which had only been heard in that original scene up until now. But before we get into the next track, I want to give you a bit of a backstory regarding the timing of this episode's release. Just before Season 8 started is when we got the first official Score album release. Most of the tracks were ones we'd been expecting, and when the track names were revealed, it was pretty easy for the community to work out what each of them would be. But there was one which left a lot of us confused, called A Return to Compassion. When the album finally released and we heard it, it took me a while to work out where this track had come from. Since there are only a small handful of tracks released, they must have been chosen out carefully, so why this obscure track which had only appeared 3 times, seemingly in random places throughout the series, and why the name? We heard it when Rick first held Judith, when the community first arrived at Alexandria, and a third time which was quite an obscure scene in Season 7, as Dwight threatens and then mercy kills someone who had escaped from the sanctuary. Then as we get towards the end of Carl's final episode, he starts talking about his vision for a better future, and this track starts to come in. Not only that, but it's expanded upon, with a guitar taking over the main melody. It's a perfect track to capture the idea of this vision for a peaceful future. And while it is quite possible that it just got pulled up as a temp track because of how it sounded, I like to think that there's a bit more meaning behind it, especially since it just got pulled out recently for the album. Analysing all the scenes where it appears, a few similarities can be found. When Rick first holds Judith, it's after he's been going insane for a few episodes following the loss of Laurie, and now he's coming back to the light. The group arrive at Alexandria after nearly losing who they were as they'd been on the road too long, fighting solely to survive. And the Dwight scene is a bit of a stretch. I'm guessing it was just a temp track which ended up in the episode, possibly due to time constraints, but you can still find some similar themes as Dwight has become a much darker version of himself, but in this brief moment shows a hint of compassion again as he humanely shoots the escapee instead of taking him back to the sanctuary to face a worse fate. And now we come to Season 8 and Rick is on a mission, driving him further and further away from the compassionate person he used to be, and focused instead on revenge and violence, until Carl reminds him of who he can be and what a different future could look like if they were to spare Negan instead of killing him. All these scenes carry themes of coming back towards the light after being in a dark place and looking towards a better future, which is exactly the legacy Carl is leaving behind. As Carl dies, the music takes a subtle and beautiful approach. It's not a tragedy in the same way that Glenn or Abraham's deaths were, out of an act of evil and violence. Carl got bit while helping someone in an effort to work towards a better future, and his death is still full of purpose, leaving behind a long-lasting legacy. Episode 14 of Season 8 ends with Rick confronting his emotions and taking out Carl's letter to finally read it. before the start of episode 15 shows what the letter actually said. In the first scene, the focus is on Rick, so the music is purely about his emotional state as he brings himself to read the letter. The episode break then allows for a complete shift in tone as we hear Carl's voice reading the letter, and the music changes to a playful, happier sound, fully encompassing Carl's character and the optimistic content of the letter.
You have to find peace with Negan. Find a way forward somehow. We don't have to forget what happened, but you can make it so that it won't happen again. That nobody has to live this way, that every life is worth something.
I could easily see the Rick-focused score sitting under the reading of the letter if it all had to be in one scene.
Start everything over. Show everyone that they can be safe again without killing, that it can feel safe again, that it can go back to being birthdays and school and jobs and even Friday night pizza somehow, and walks with a dad and a 3-year-old holding hands.
But I'm really glad we got both approaches, as I think they were both very important to feature.
Make that come back, Dad. And go on those walks with Judith. She'll remember them. I love you, Carl.
As we reach the conclusion of the war with the Saviors, the music shifts through a number of different tones to show the weight of Rick's choice as he makes the decision to spare Negan's life. Of course, this isn't to everyone's liking, so the music stays in the middle ground. If the music went with a happy, fulfilling approach, it would have felt out of place for Maggie's reaction, but conveying Maggie's emotions would have taken away from the goodness of Rick's choice and the fulfillment of Carl's legacy. While it can't have been easy to score, I think it strikes a very balanced approach, capturing a mixture of the emotions felt by all the characters, and of course featuring a hint at the return to compassion melody. Finally, as Rick collapses under a tree, a more intimate piano and guitar take the focus back to him, with a track that brings fulfillment and closure to the long-spanning arc.
My mercy prevails over my wrath.
The finale episode opened with the first few notes from A Return to Compassion, with the guitar taking the lead this time, and it ends with a full rendition to bring the episode full circle. The choir comes back in as the sequence plays out and brings conclusion to the season and to the story of The Walking Dead so far. Coming into Season 9, the show makes a shift away from surviving in a fallen world to building the new world. The music makes some big changes towards a purely rustic sound, reflecting the historic technology that the characters are using and the stage of development the communities are at. Gone are the days of siphoning fuel and driving cars from place to place, as this season opens with the characters riding horse-drawn cars and carriages on a mission to raid old farming supplies from a museum. Electric instruments and sounds are still used in the score, but much more sparingly and pretty much only for action sequences. The fiddle here especially provides this very rustic feel to the world as we're introduced to a new theme that will span throughout Season 9. Sam Ewing described this as the hope theme for the season, and as one that develops and grows following the development of the communities coming together. This coming together is the central theme of the season before and after Rick's departure. It starts very stripped back with the solo fiddle opening the first episode. Then as we go into episode 2, we start with a guitar playing an underlying melody, which we've heard and will hear from time to time. This blends with the main fiddle theme for a slightly fuller sound as the communities are working together, building literal and metaphorical bridges. As the third episode arrives and things are progressing even further, the same theme plays but with an even fuller sound and the addition of more instruments. But a few episodes later, 6 years after Rick's departure and the destruction of the bridge, it's only heard as a faint echo from the past. It's a while before it comes back, as the fractured relationships between the communities take time to heal. But finally, in episode 15, everyone agrees to unify together and a member from each community signs the charter. The theme comes back again in full force as the characters bring fulfillment to Rick's vision, bringing the season full circle in a way that works really well and pulls the whole story together, seeing Rick's legacy live on. Rick's big episode is of course a massive event and is full of very effective music. I can't go through the whole episode's music, but I highly recommend that you check it out and listen for the music as the episode plays out. The two biggest highlights for me are firstly the reveal of the field of bodies in one of Rick's hallucinations. Even before the symbolism and meaning of this scene is revealed, I was brought to tears by the music as we're shown the bodies of both characters who are still alive and past characters who died long ago. As Sasha arrives to the scene and talks with Rick, it pulls everything together. We're left with an effective amount of silence and atmospheric sounds, but when the music does continue, it takes more of a back seat and provides a comforting sound to contrast the seemingly dark imagery. As the scene plays out, the message Sasha gives to Rick is that it's okay that he hasn't fixed everything. He can't save everyone, but that doesn't mean he isn't leaving a legacy. The dialogue catches up to the music to make a beautiful scene, fulfilling Rick's storyline for the season. After leading the mega herd to the bridge in hopes of bringing it down before they reach Hilltop, the rest of the characters arrive to the scene on the opposite side of the river. The music builds up anticipation for the epic climax as the characters race to save Rick before it's too late. This is where we get the scarcely used main title theme, tied into a cue that captures the excitement, action, and tragedy of what's unfolding. Finally, as Rick is out of time, he aims to take his shot to blow up the bridge, but not before bringing his whole story full circle. Having begun this journey looking for his family, he's now found an even truer sense of the word family in the people he's met along the way.
I found him.
Seeing the reactions of Michonne, Daryl, and the rest of the characters, we're given a somber melody focused on their loss. But this will return down the line, bringing a new dimension to the melody when hints of Rick still being alive start to appear.